Imagine finding a notebook that can kill anyone, anywhere, just by writing their name. Now imagine being hunted by the world's greatest detective, while everything you built starts quietly collapsing around you. That's the deal Death Note hands a teenager, and by the end, you'll be asking yourself the one question it never really answers: would you have done it too? This is Death Note. Stick with me, because underneath the notebook, the chase, and that twist ending, this is one of the most brutal case studies on power ever put on screen. I'm breaking down this controversial remake, so let's get into it. We open on Light Turner, and right away the movie wants you to notice something: he isn't a villain. He's a smart kid doing other students' homework just to buy himself a little piece, which tells you exactly where he sits in the pecking order, smart enough to see how unfair everything is, powerless to do anything about it. That's the whole setup in one sentence, because it means this isn't a story about a bad person getting power. It's about what happens when an ordinary one does. Then, out of nowhere, a notebook falls out of the sky into his school courtyard. He reads the rules, rolls his eyes, and that's when Ryuk steps out of the shadows to claim it. There's nothing dramatic about the notebook itself, either no glowing pages, no ominous music sting the way lesser movies would play it. It's just a plain black cover, scuffed at the corners, sitting in the mud like litter. The movie wants you to feel how unremarkable evil can look right before it changes everything, and that quiet, almost boring first impression is doing more work than it gets credit for. And that's what makes this different from a typical horror setup. There's no curse forcing Light's hand, no monster he has to appease to survive. The notebook doesn't need him to use it. It just sits there, patient, offering a choice with no one else to blame if he takes it. That's the trap the movie keeps circling back to: power that asks nothing of you except whether you're willing to pick it up. So Light tests it. He writes down a bully's name, half expecting nothing, and when that kid actually drops dead, the look on Light's face isn't triumph, it's horror. For a moment, we're watching a scared teenager realize he just killed someone with a pen. But that horror turns into justification almost instantly. He's only taking out the worst of the worst, he tells himself, the people the system already failed to punish. One name becomes two becomes 20, and no single kill ever feels like the moment everything changed. It's only when you zoom out that you see how far he's gone, and the kills keep escalating, until the world starts noticing. Criminals are dropping dead at a pace that makes headlines. Nobody knows who's doing it, but a name starts spreading before anyone official even confirms this is real: Kara. Within weeks, this becomes a global phenomenon. Some people paint his symbol on walls like he's a savior. Others hold vigils, terrified, demanding he be stopped. That split is the most realistic thing in the whole movie, because it's exactly how the real world reacts to certainty dressed up as safety. Think about how fast this actually escalates on screen. In just a handful of scenes, a string of anonymous deaths turns into a worldwide argument about morality, playing out on every news channel and every forum at once. People who have never heard Light's voice are already picking sides. The movie isn't really inventing anything here, it's just pointing a camera at how information spreads now, how a rumor becomes accepted fact just by getting repeated enough, and how fast a scared public will hand its trust to whoever sounds the most certain. And this is where the film sneaks in its scariest observation: nobody actually needs proof to believe in Kira. They just need the feeling of safety the idea of him provides. Both sides are reacting to a symbol, not a person, and Light hasn't even figured out who he wants to be underneath it all before the entire planet decides for him. The fame changes him before anything else does. He stops asking, should I write this name, and starts asking, can the world survive without me doing this? That's not a power problem anymore. That's an ego problem wearing a power costume. And you don't need a killer notebook to recognize this pattern. Every time a real-world figure gets treated as untouchable because they promise a fix nobody else will deliver, the same math is happening, people trading their questions for the relief of finally having an answer, even a violent one. The movie isn't really about Japan or vigilante justice specifically. It's about how easily someone is finally doing something replaces, is this actually right? You can watch the shift happen in real time. Early on, Light is cautious, checking over his shoulder. By the time the world is chanting Kara's name, he's calm, almost comfortable. He's slipped into a role that finally fits. That should unsettle you more than any of the deaths. The power didn't make him reckless, it made him feel, for the first time, like he mattered. And giving that up starts to feel less like doing the right thing and more like disappearing all over again. Now enter Mia, and this is where the movie gets genuinely uncomfortable, because their relationship isn't what it looks like. It looks like two teenagers bonded by an insane secret. What it actually is a feedback loop with no breaks. Every time Light hesitates, Mia finishes his sentence for him and hands him the justification he hasn't worked out yet. She's not forcing him, she's just removing the one thing that might have made him stop and think. Neither one of them is really controlling the other. They're amplifying whatever was already sitting inside each other. At this point, the notebook stops being a weapon and starts acting like an addiction. Every kill gives Light this brief hit of okay, this one will finally fix it, and it never does, because the list of who deserves it keeps quietly getting longer. Nobody in the movie ever announces the mission changed. It just changes, quietly. That's the moment this stops being a supernatural thriller and turns into a slow-motion study of how a person justifies their way into becoming someone unrecognizable. And once you accept that logic even once, there's no natural stopping point left. Every future exception gets to borrow the same reasoning that excused the first one, which is exactly how the list of names quietly stops being about criminals at all. There's a pattern here that shows up over and over anytime real people abuse real power, and the movie nails it without ever spelling it out. Almost nobody who crosses this line thinks of themselves as the villain in their own story. They think of themselves as the one person clear-headed enough to make the impossible call everyone else is too scared to make. And once you believe that about yourself, disagreement stops registering as disagreement. It starts registering as a threat. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of all this, we've got L, and he represents a completely different definition of justice than anything Kara stands for. Kara is certainty. L is doubt, on purpose. He investigates instead of assuming. He waits for evidence while the public screams at him to move faster. Light believes the ends justify the means. L believes the process is the only thing that makes the outcome mean anything. It shouldn't be a fair fight. L has the entire task force, resources, jurisdiction. Light has a notebook and his own nerve, but it never feels lopsided because L's biggest strength, playing by the rules, is also his biggest limitation, while Light is bound by nothing except a conscience worn down to almost nothing. And L never announces his suspicions outright. He lets Light's own arrogance do the talking. He studies patterns instead of chasing rumors, timing of deaths, methods, the tiny inconsistencies a killer convinced of his own righteousness stops bothering to hide. It's slower than the public wants, but it's the only approach that can actually survive contact with the truth. L never plays it safe either. He's actively baiting Light, feeding fake names to the press, floating false leads just to see how Kira reacts, turning the whole investigation into a psychological trap instead of a straightforward manhunt. Every move is a test disguised as a mistake, and every time Light takes the bait, he hands L a little more proof without realizing it. And underneath all the chess moves, the film asks you directly, should people follow the law because they believe in it? Or because they're scared of an invisible executioner who might be watching them right now? Is peace built on pure fear even real peace, or is it just quiet, waiting to break? Now let's talk about how this actually ends, because the last 20 minutes are where everything collapses at once. It's a smart choice on the movie's part, staging the biggest betrayal of the whole story somewhere built for fun, cotton candy, rides, kids laughing in the background. That contrast doesn't need to be pointed out for you to feel it. Everything about the setting says nothing bad could happen here, right up until it does. It all comes to a head at a carnival. Loud lights, normal people having a normal night, a world that has no idea two teenagers a few feet away are deciding who lives and dies. Light and Mia end up on a Ferris wheel to settle, once and for all, who controls the notebook, trapped together in a slow, circular ride with nowhere to go. Mia wants to keep killing. No hesitation, no limits. And for the first time in the entire movie, Light hesitates. So instead of handing over control, he tricks her. Remember the notebook's actual rule: anyone whose name is written in it dies, and if you don't specify a cause, they simply drop dead within 40 seconds. But Light uses a torn page and a loophole buried in those rules to wipe the memories Mia's entire identity has been built around since she found out this thing was real. Disoriented, panicking, not even understanding what's happening to her, Mia falls from the ride, and Light lets it happen. This is the moment that damns him more than any of the actual murders, because there's no Kira justification available here. She wasn't a criminal. She was a partner he didn't need anymore, and the movie refuses to soften that. He watches her fall. That's the whole scene. Notice, too, how quiet that final confrontation is compared to everything that led up to it. No dramatic speech, no last-minute reversal, no triumphant takedown. Just two exhausted people who've been circling each other for the entire runtime, finally standing close enough to see exactly what the other one has become. From there it's a free-fall. El and Wadari finally close the gap between suspicion and hard proof, and they corner Light with evidence he can't talk his way around. Their last face-to-face boils down to something painfully simple: two people who both genuinely believed they were saving the world, standing on opposite sides of a line neither can walk back across. In the chaos, Light gets shot, and for the first time since he picked up that notebook, he's completely, physically powerless. Whether he survives is left deliberately unclear. That's not the movie being lazy, it's refusing to give him a clean punishment or a clean redemption. It leaves him exactly where his choices put him. And then comes the gut punch final image. Pages torn torn loose from the notebook during that last chaotic fight scatter out into the world, landing in the hands of random strangers who have no idea what they're holding. That's the whole point of the ending. Kira was never really about light specifically. It was always about how many ordinary people, handed the exact same impossible power under the exact same impossible pressure, would end up making the exact same choices he did. So the movie doesn't end with a solution. It ends with a warning that just keeps quietly repeating itself. And that's really the point of this whole story. It's not asking whether you'd pick up the notebook. Everyone already thinks they know that answer, and everyone's answer flatters themselves. The real question is quieter than that. Once you'd already picked it up, would you actually know the moment to put it back down? This movie doesn't hand you a clean verdict on who was right, light or L. What it hands you instead is a mirror, just long enough to catch your own reflection sitting somewhere between light's certainty and L's doubt, and to wonder which one you'd actually turn out to be. And honestly, that's why this movie keeps getting talked about years after it dropped, even by people who'll happily tell you the pacing has issues or that it wanders from the source material. Underneath all of that, it's still asking the one question that never goes out of style. What happens to a person the moment they stop needing anyone else's permission to decide who lives and who doesn't? That's Death Note. A simple, seductive idea that spends 2 hours showing you exactly how it takes a person apart, piece by piece, one justified name at a time. If this recap gave you something to actually think about, that's the whole reason I made it. Let me know in the comments what you would have done differently, and hit subscribe for more breakdowns like this one right here on AllSam Recaps. I'll see you in the next one.